Hello, everyone, and welcome to the introductory webinar for recipients of the Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives program. I'm Krista Williford, Director of Research and Assessment at CLEAR, and I'm connecting to you today from a hotel room in Washington, D.C. on Wi-Fi. So we're really hoping for the best, and that's the reason why you don't see us on video today. But we are so glad that you're here, and we want to start by saying congratulations to you one more time. This is an extremely competitive grant program, and if you're here, it's because reviewers believe that your work will make an important impact. We're excited to watch you work and watch your project progress over the coming months and years. So the purpose of today's webinar is to walk you through the administrative processes associated with holding a grant with us. At this point, many of you will be at different stages in your projects. Hidden Collections grants can start anytime between January 1st and June 1st. So some of you will be halfway through your first year already, while others of you will just be starting out. So we'll begin with a presentation followed by questions and answers at the end. We are recording this webinar and we'll be uploading a link to it on our website, along with our slides and transcript for reference later, and for you to share with any other colleagues who are unable to attend today. Before we get started, I'd like to orient you quickly to the Zoom webinar space. For better group listening experience, all participants are muted, so you'll need to communicate with us through the chat box. If a chat box is not currently displaying on your screen, just hover towards the bottom of your Zoom window to open it. The default is set to send your messages to presenters only. So be sure to change that setting using the drop-down menu to send a message to everyone here. We may also share links here in the chat, and that will be captured as part of our recording for your reference later. We'll be gathering questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box. That's accessible in the same way that you see the chat, by hovering over the bottom of the Zoom window. Feel free to contribute questions in that space at any time, and we'll make sure at the end of the presentation to address all the questions that you insert there. All participants are also able to upvote questions, which will help us to see if multiple individuals have the same question. We're a small group here today, so we'll definitely have time to do everything. So we'd like to quickly introduce you to the staff members on CLEAR's grant team present with us today. I introduced myself, Krista Williford. Next, we'll go down the list here and introduce the rest of my colleagues.
Hi, I am Joy Banks. I am a program officer and will be delivering most of the content for today's webinar, and I'm sitting right next to Krista in the room, so we're here together.
I'm Kristen Blair. I'm a program administrator at CLEAR, and I'll be working on transcribing your questions.
This is Becca. I'm a program officer for the program, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to help along the way as you get going on your projects.
And hi, I'm Nikki Ferriolo, Director of Global Strategic Initiatives at CLEAR, and I'm just here to support the webinar.
Great. So now with no further ado, we'll turn the program over to Joy, who will be leading our presentation.
Thanks, Krista. So today we'll be covering the following topics divided into two parts. The first will be covering a brief introduction to CLEAR, our publications, and just a few of our other CLEAR programs. And then in part two, we'll transition to grant management and talk about grant modifications, reporting requirements, and our different communication channels. We'll end, as Krista said, with questions, and do feel free at any point during our presentation to just type your answers into the Q&A box. For those of you who may be new to CLEAR, we are an independent nonprofit organization that forges strategies to enhance research, teaching, and learning environments in collaboration with libraries, cultural institutions, and communities of higher learning. So what does that all mean? CLEAR takes on a number of roles, including publishing research, convening meetings, and running programs. We're an independent nonprofit, so we're not part of the federal government, and we're also not a private foundation. Our activities are not funded by an endowment, but rather by a combination of grants and sponsorships, which gives us the flexibility to operate our programs a bit differently than the federal funders. We're also a very small operation in comparison, with about 17 full-time staff members. The Digitizing Hidden Collections program is a re-granting program, which means the funds for your projects were awarded from a grant to CLEAR from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. CLEAR reapplies periodically to Mellon for the funds to operate the Hidden Collections program and award new grants, so we can completely empathize with all of the work that you put in to get here. Along with the grants, the support of our sponsors helps cover many general operation costs at CLEAR. Our sponsors include college and university libraries, museums, and other cultural heritage institutions. Very little of what we do, the Hidden Collections program included, would be possible without our sponsors. Just over half of your cohort of projects involve sponsor institutions. So even if you weren't aware of this, we do want to say thank you for helping us do this important work. Now for our bit of a shameless plug, if your institution does not yet sponsor CLEAR and you would like to learn more about sponsorship, do let us know and we'd be more than happy to put you in touch with our Director of Development and Outreach, Louisa Quasi-Fra. CLEAR has long been known for its free and open publication series, also known as its Burgundy books. And while our scope of operation has expanded to include more programmatic activities, we still have an emphasis on research. CLEAR has published on a range of topics, including but certainly not limited to audio archiving, library and library service design, email archiving, 3D VR visualization, data management, digital preservation, and more. One publication we'd like to highlight is displayed here, Innovation, Collaboration, and Models. This was the capstone publication of our Cataloging Hidden Special Collections and Archives program, the predecessor to our current digitization program, and is meant to share the models and lessons learned from cataloging and processing grants funded between 2008 and 2014. This volume consists of a series of papers from a symposium and unconference held in March 2015 and is available for free on our website. And even though it dates from just a few years ago now, some of its content may be useful to you as you think about description, scholarly engagement, and outreach for your project. Later this summer, we'll also be publishing a white paper summarizing a retrospective analysis of the impact of all 128 projects that were funded through our cataloging grants over the program's history. Thinking ahead, we do have plans to host a similar symposium for the Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives grant program, which will be held in the fall of 2020 in connection with the Digital Library Federation, or DLF, Forum. The DLF is another program of CLEAR, which we'll cover more in a bit, but if you weren't aware of the forum, you might want to check out the DLF website, diglib.org. In addition to information about the forum, there is a community events calendar, a CLEAR DLF job posting board, details about the work of the many working groups organized and supported by DLF. So these working groups are open to anyone. You don't have to be a part of a CLEAR sponsor organization or a DLF member institution to participate. The activities of the Digital Library Assessment and Labor Working Group may be particularly relevant to your work on this project. As you're working on your project, you may want to think about how you might share any outcomes or lessons with your colleagues in the working groups or even at the DLF forum, and certainly thinking ahead to the Hidden Collections Symposium in the fall of 2020. In addition to Hidden Collections and our publication series, CLEAR does run a number of other programs, and here is just a small sampling of some of the things we do. Some of you may be familiar with our Recordings at Risk re-granting program, focusing on preservation of at-risk, high scholarly value audio, audiovisual, and film recordings. Recordings at Risk offers smaller grants over shorter periods of time. Our postdoctoral fellowship program places recent PhDs in academic libraries and other collecting and research institutions to strengthen connections among collections, data, technology, and current research. We are also involved in the Leading Change Institute, which is the successor program to the Frye Leadership Institute, and is a boot camp for leaders in higher education with an emphasis on issues facing libraries and information technology services as they strive to adapt to the changing needs of 21st century learners. One of our newer endeavors is the Digital Library of the Middle East. The DLME aims to create a digitally based, internationally shared inventory of cultural artifacts that includes detailed descriptions and images and confirms object ownership and legal status. And finally, as we mentioned, the Digital Library Federation, or DLF. The DLF is a robust, diverse, and inclusive community of practitioners who advance research, learning, social justice, and the public good through the creative design and wise application of digital library technologies. While CLEAR is its parent organization, DLF's work is supported by its own member institutions. This support enables the DLF to plan events like the DLF Forum and to foster working groups that advance the field of digital librarianship. Again, these working groups are open to anyone, so for those who may be interested, this year's DLF Forum will take place in Tampa, Florida from October 14th through the 16th. And registration for the 2019 Forum just opened today, so yay, go check that out right now. Many of CLEAR's programs, the Digitizing Hidden Collections program included, intertwine with the DLF mission. Now that you know who we are and sort of the range of things that we do as an organization, we're going to move into a discussion about some key administrative information for you as the latest recipients of Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives grants. This next section will cover grant modifications, reporting requirements, and an overview of channels of communication. Although we hope and expect that project activities listed in the approved proposals that were submitted will be executed as described, we do understand that unanticipated issues can arise, which may require that you deviate from the original plans that you submitted. Some changes won't require pre-approval from CLEAR, so these are changes like project staff other than the principal investigators, or say small shifts in budget expenditures. Many small changes can be addressed in a project's interim narrative and financial report. However, changes that affect the underlying terms of the grant must receive approval by CLEAR. Examples of this would include extensions of the project end date, changes to PIs, any changes to the collections being digitized through the project, and significant budget reallocations. These modification requests are common for this program, and you should not hesitate to ask us for what you need to do to successfully complete your project. Program staff can always be reached by email at hiddencollections@clear.org. To move forward with a modification, CLEAR has an online form through which recipients can notify us of modification requests. The form was designed to streamline the process and reduce the amount of time spent making and approving these requests. Access to this grant modification and extension request form is available through a link at the top of the Recipient Resources webpage. The same form is used across CLEAR's grant programs and is designed to allow for the request of multiple types of modification requests at one time. So you could apply for an extension and a change in PI in the same form. The form includes sections on descriptive information, questions about extension requests, other modification requests, and then a space to provide a brief explanation and justification of the modification. In order for you to prepare the necessary information for the modification request, we also provide a grant modification form template linked to on this slide and then also available on the Recipient Resources page. This slide shows the Google Doc template for the modification request form. The online form does involve some question logic, so you may not be required to answer all of the questions on the template depending on how you answer others. A link is provided at the top of the document that allows you to create a personal copy of the template that you can share with anyone you're collaborating with. All modification requests should be submitted through the online form. So you'll need to copy and paste your prepared responses into that space. Here's just a real quick glimpse of what the online grant modification and extension request form looks like. Once the form has been submitted and received, you should hear from CLEAR staff within about 2 weeks. For that reason, if you find you need a modification, it is important to request at least a few weeks and ideally a month before the final end date for your grant. Project end dates were included in the award letter that was sent to you with the check for funds. If you ever need a reminder of your project end date or award number, just reach out to us at the Hidden Collections email account. Some modifications, such as changes in principal investigators, should be requested immediately rather than waiting until the end of your project. In many cases, completing the form will be all you need to do to seek approval for a modification. However, under certain circumstances, additional documentation may be required in order to move forward with the request. The guidelines for modification requests vary slightly between CLEAR's different grant programs, so be sure to check the Recipient Resources pages for the most up-to-date information. And if you have any questions about the process, CLEAR staff is always available via email through our program email address, hiddencollections@clear.org. Now we'll just cover a little more information about the types of modification requests. No-cost extension requests are exactly what they sound like, a request to push back the project end date and final report without requesting additional funding. These may be requested in the case of unforeseen project delays, which may include prolonged personnel search due to staff turnover, delays when working with a vendor partner, or perhaps delays caused by institutional infrastructure issues. No-cost extensions should be requested between 1 and 3 months prior to a project's end date. The reason we ask you to wait until these final months is that only one no-cost extension can be granted per project. And we found that requests made closer to the end date provide more accurate estimates of the amount of extra time that's actually needed to complete your project. We do encourage you to take time now to perhaps set a calendar reminder for your team for 3 months before the end of your project, so you'll know when it's time to request an extension if you need one. You may also want to set a similar reminder for all of your reporting deadlines. It's important to note that extensions cannot be granted for projects whose end dates have already passed. We really can't emphasize enough the importance of paying attention to this date. It's also worth noting that the project end date comes typically 3 months before your final report deadline, since some people have been a little confused about this in the past. We recommend standard project extension lengths of either 12 or 6 months. On a request form, you are also able to enter a custom date, but we do reserve the right to make an alternative recommendation. To complete this modification request, use the grant modification form on the recipient resources page. The form is often sufficient for staff to evaluate the request, but we may occasionally request just a little additional information or documentation. If one of the principal investigators, also known as PIs, changes during the period of the grantee must inform CLEAR immediately by completing the grant modification form. All of CLEAR's grant management tasks require current contact details for every grant's principal investigator, so it's important to know when a PI departs your organization and that their responsibilities have been transferred to someone else. In order to complete the change of PI, you will also be required to supply via email a letter on institutional letterhead from the head of the institution or department. The letter doesn't need to be long, but should include the name and title of the new PI, as well as the date the change will become effective. A CV for the new PI will also be required for our files. On occasion, grantees find it necessary to spend grant funds in a manner other than originally proposed in their application. Reallocation of grant funds are allowable, but these changes must be approved by CLEAR staff prior to the reallocated funds being spent. To initiate this process, complete the online grant modification form. Any proposed use of reallocated funds should be aligned with the original goals and scope of the project and within the current guidelines for allowable and disallowed costs for the hidden collections program. As a rule of thumb, for smaller hidden collections projects, which we define as under $200,000, CLEAR generally doesn't require notification for reallocations that amount to less than 5% of a project's total budget. Larger projects, so those over $200,000, and all projects really should contact CLEAR about any reallocations that are over $10,000. When in doubt, just ask, or you can go ahead and complete the grant modification form and we'll process that as we normally do. When completing the grant modification form, you will be asked to provide the amount of funds remaining in the grant, how much, if any, of the original funds will remain at the close of the project, and a brief description of how the funds will be spent. CLEAR program staff may request additional information, such as a revised project budget, to complete review of this request. All of this information, so don't panic, all of this information can be found on the recipient resources page. Should we update any of our grant modification procedures, we'll post the most up-to-date information there for your reference, and also reach out to PIs for significant changes. Do be sure to share this webpage with all staff that may be involved in the management of your project over time, so everybody has a sense of these rules and guidelines. CLEAR program staff are available to answer any of your questions related to modifications, so really don't hesitate to reach out via our program email account. For more complicated grant modification requests, grant recipients may find it helpful to set up a phone call with a program officer prior to submitting their request. And you can do that just by writing to that hiddencollections@clear.org to schedule a time to call. At this point, we'll be shifting into a discussion of reporting requirements. You may wonder why we talk about reporting at the beginning, but hopefully that will become clear. Recipients of the Hidden Collections Grant are required to submit reports according to the schedule outlined in each of your award letters. Your first report is due a year and 1 month after the start date of your project. And then each interim report as required after that is due exactly 1 year after the previous report. Your final report is due 3 months after your project end date. This means we should be receiving 1 report from you each year. If your project is only 12 months, you will just submit your final report 3 months after the end date of your project. Your annual reports to CLEAR are a deeply important part of the agreement between our grantees, so that's you, CLEAR, and then our own funder, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. The Digitizing Hidden Collections staff compiles its own report on the Hidden Collections program each year, which we then submit to Mellon on June 30th. This report also includes all of the reports we receive from our recipients that year and communicates to Mellon the importance of the work that all of you are doing. CLEAR will accept reports for this program solely through an online form, which is linked to from our recipient resources page. Grantees are required to submit both narrative and financial reports on or before the due dates specified in your award letter. If you don't have access to a copy of your letter and need to know your designated report dates or any other information related to your report, do let us know again at the program email. An email reminder from CLEAR will be sent to the PIs on file around a month prior to the due date for each of your annual interim reports and around 3 months prior to your project's end date. Login for reporting will be the same as that used to submit your proposal, so be sure to keep track of that login information. Just a few more words on reporting. Reports are not only a way to help us keep up with your progress, but also a means for us to provide the best support to you as your project evolves. So for instance, we may be able to suggest others in the Hidden Collections community who have faced similar challenges as the ones you report facing. Your reports can also help us to help you identify and mitigate potential issues in advance. For example, we may notice from your reports that you may need a no-cost extension and can remind you of that process. However, if an issue is time-sensitive or if you have a specific question, we do encourage you to reach out about it directly to program staff. If you find that your report is likely to be late due to circumstances beyond your control, which we know can happen, sometimes there might be a surprise departure of our PI, just let us know as soon as possible. We're glad to work with our grantees in these situations, but it's important that we hear about them before your report is overdue, since your reports do affect our own reporting to the Mellon Foundation. You'll use the same system, SurveyMonkey Apply or SM Apply, that was used to submit your proposal for your grant for reporting. So we've linked to that on this slide and as well on the recipient resources page. All communication and reminders for reporting will be sent to the primary principal investigator. So if there are any others involved in project work who need such notifications, so if there's somebody in another office who will help you with reporting, do be sure to send us those names and contact information so we can add them to our records. It's a good idea to log into SM Apply at your soonest convenience using the same email address and password you used to create your application. So if you use these same credentials, you should automatically see the reporting form for your project when you log in. If you've forgotten these credentials or lose access to them for any reason, for example, if the person who created your application leaves your organization, you will need to contact us through the program email so that we can link your report to the correct credentials. One way to future-proof your team's access to the report would be to log in now using the application credentials, hit start to pretend like you're starting your report, and then add other team members' email addresses as collaborators on your report. It was a similar mechanism in the proposal phase. Collaborators will then receive an automatic invitation to verify their email addresses and create their own passwords to access the system. Once they do this, they will also be able to log in to view the report and enter data. One of the system's safety measures does ensure that only the primary principal investigator is able to submit a report. So if one of the collaborators eventually needs to submit, that person will still need to contact us to make sure that this can happen. Teams of collaborators working on project reports can also reference our collaborative Google Doc template for report forms available on the Recipient Resources page, which includes the questions you'll be expected to answer on the reporting form. Note that there are two slightly different templates. So one is for projects granted in 2016 through 2017, and another one that is for yours and future cohorts. So be sure to use the template for 2018. Using the template, you have the option to begin working on your draft report as early as you would like. For now, we're just going to briefly cover the components of the report so that you're prepared with the relevant information you need when the time comes. The report form is organized into 4 or 5 sections. So there's general information, narrative assessment, quantitative assessment, financial assessment, and then final project assessment, which is obviously for final reports only. When writing your report, the first place to start is the final proposal you submitted to CLEAR during the application process. All sections of the report should demonstrate the project's consistency with these original ideas. Of course, some variations are to be expected as the project adapts to real-life scenarios and new opportunities. Small differences between the planned approach and actual project work can be explained in the narrative report. However, as mentioned earlier, grantees will need to request grant modifications for more substantive changes, particularly those regarding the budget, timeline, or deliverables. Overall, it is important to demonstrate to CLEAR and the Mellon Foundation that the scope and goals of the project continue to reflect the proposal selected for funding by CLEAR's independent review panel. We're now going to do a quick walkthrough of the information you'll be asked to include in your report. The first section of our report covers just real general information, so your award reference number, which was in your award letter, the project title, institution, PIs, and then contact information of the person submitting the report if we have questions. Section 2 is where you'll provide a narrative assessment of your project. The first thing we'll ask about are some internal and public developments, and these are just a series of checkboxes on the form. They're going to include things like, did you create digitization metrics, the implementation of new workflows, implementation of new tools, new donations, or perhaps a grant application. We also want to hear about public developments. So these would include the creation of a new blog or other social media accounts, research guides, maybe the digitized materials are being incorporated into curricula, or perhaps there are publications arising from research. You'll also have a chance to summarize the project goals and objectives during the reporting period and explain any changes or additions to your original plans. You can elaborate on the developments you've checked off above. So, you know, a checkbox and then a description of it, and any other significant accomplishments and outcomes of the project, both for your institution, your professional community, and for the collection's users. You can discuss challenges or setbacks you've experienced, whether expected or unexpected, and your strategies for addressing them. You can tell us about the individuals who have made contributions to the project and briefly describe the roles that each has played. And finally, you can tell us about your outreach initiatives, future plans, and you can upload additional documentation related to the project, such as slides, workflows, training materials, assessment data, or whatever. The next section of the report form will ask for information about three things: the quantity and types of materials you have proposed to digitize, and the master digital files created through that digitization, the materials digitized and digital files created during the entire grant, and other quantities of deliverables you want to note for us, such as the creation of metadata records, linked data, URIs produced, authority records created, etc. To complete this part of the report, it will be very helpful to refer to your original proposal. So it's a good idea to check now to be sure that a copy of your proposal is stored somewhere that your reporting team can access it when the time comes. Compiling these numbers will be much easier if you plan now to track them as your project proceeds. So setting up a shared document to do that will be something you'll thank yourself for later. CLEAR does have an Excel template that you can use for this if you wish, and it's located on the recipient resources page. In the report, you'll also find a space for optional data contribution to the digitization cost calculator. This is a project by the Digital Libraries Federation Assessment Interest Group, Assessment Interest Group's Working Group on Cost Assessment. The calculator is a tool that runs on community contributed data and provides estimates of time and cost to those planning digitization projects. Hidden Collections grant recipients have been invited to contribute data from their projects to help make the calculator more robust and reliable. If you're interested in contributing, though it is not a requirement, you can email info@diglib.org to be put in touch with a representative from the cost calculator team. The next part of the reporting form that I want to touch on is the financial assessment, which comes in two parts. The first is the financial narrative. So in the financial narrative, you can comment on actual grant expenditures during the reporting period as they relate to your proposed budget. Every budget category should be addressed here, and if there are any variances of 5% or more between projected and actual spending, do make sure to include a detailed explanation here. You should also discuss any approved budget modifications in this part of your report. So those would be since your last report. The second part is the financial report, which is an upload using the same budget and financial report form that you submitted with your proposal. The only difference is that you have both the budgeted and actual fields filled in this time instead of just the budgeted column as in the proposal. On this slide, we provided a screenshot of the budget detail just in case you haven't seen that or are trying to forget what it looks like. That's what it looks like. When it comes time to submit your final report, as opposed to your interim reports, You'll include a final project assessment. So the report is very much the same, but with an added element. There are 4 required components. The first is the final project narrative, which is an overall assessment of your project, including the most significant outcomes and challenges and the most valuable lessons learned. The second is the final financial narrative and report, which will be similar to your interim report. And then the last 2 components of your final project assessment will ask you to point us towards your digitized collections and metadata. The first of these will request the names and URLs of the catalogs, repositories, or services through which the digitized files and associated metadata have been made available. The second component will be a project manifest, which will ask for URLs and file names for the access copies of all the digital files created through your project. Just a few more details on the project manifest. This is a spreadsheet which includes the names and locations of the digital files, and this will normally be the access copies, as well as notations about any checksums and restrictions to access. We're requiring this because we're using a tool, a kind of web crawler, that will allow us to conduct periodic checks that the online files created through CLEAR's digitization regranting program remain, in fact, online. Note that CLEAR's template for this does have multiple tabs, including one with instructions, so be sure to read through all of them. Taking a look at this template now and building completion of this document into your workflow will, again, help you save time later. For those of you who work with vendors, often your digitization vendor will return a spreadsheet to you that will be very similar to what you need to submit here. And you should be able to adapt the vendor spreadsheet for this template. If you work out your file naming conventions at the start of your project and ensure your vendor names your files exactly according to your needs, most of your work for this requirement will already be done. If you leave it until the end, it might take some scrambling to pull it all together. So we do strongly recommend coming up with a strategy for compiling this data during the course of your project work. Of all of the pieces of the final report, this document is really what allows us to verify that you have created all the deliverables agreed upon when you accepted the grant. This evidence will be critical to our own reporting to the Mellon Foundation, so we really do appreciate your help in making this possible for us. The final section of our presentation is just some information about modes of communication. First, we do want to let you know we have an organization-wide acknowledgement guidelines, which were created by CLEAR's Director of Communications that may be useful to you. Some of you are already aware of this and have followed them. These contain boilerplate language, information about the use of CLEAR logos, and similar things. The link on the slide will take you to those guidelines, and this resource is also linked to on the recipient resources page. These provide assistance for a variety of situations, such as news releases, social media posts, press events, and so on. If you'll be publishing any formal press releases, we do request that you provide those to us in advance for a quick review. CLEAR's website contains a lot of information for you as you move into your grant recipient role. So just as you may have used the resources of the applicant resources page during the grant writing process, we do have a similar recipient resources page that we've talked about quite a lot today as you work through your project. Here you'll find information on grant modification and reporting that we discussed earlier. Additionally, contact information for the CLEAR grants team, templates for various things, and information on citing CLEAR are all contained on this page. From this page, you'll also find links to our funded projects page and the registry. On the funded projects page, you can find descriptions of each of the projects that you've been funded, that have been funded by the Hidden Collections program to date. If you've not done so already, please proofread the summary of your project that's currently posted there and send us any proposed changes. The Hidden Collections Registry is a public database with information about all of the collections that have been proposed for either cataloging or digitization through this program, as well as the Recordings at Risk program. Data about your project is not yet in the registry, but we hope to have an update at the end of this year. The best way to contact us all is through the Hidden Collections email box. We monitor it as a team, so can direct your question in the right direction. We also love to hear about your progress. If you are sharing updates on Twitter, do be sure to tag us using @ClearHC or #DigHC so we can retweet your posts, amplifying the reach of your updates. And if there's something you'd like us to tweet and you don't have the resources to do that, just email us at thehiddencollections@clear.org. Finally, one last resource we'd like to share is the Digitizing Special Formats Wiki. This is a project of the DLF and contains a growing collection of resources about planning and executing digitization projects. If there are additional resources you think would be helpful to include on the guide, you can just email us at the program email and we'll pass along your suggestions. So, thank you all for joining us on our webinar today. We know that we've covered a lot of material and we do have time for questions. So if you'd like to ask one, please go ahead and type it into the Q&A box.
Thank you, Joy. That was a lot of information. Yeah, we hope we did answer most of your questions. Again, the presentation today, both the recorded version and the slides that we prepared for it, as well as the transcript, will be available on that recipient resources page for you over the coming years as you continue your work. So we'll just pause here to wait a few minutes to see if any of you have any questions or want us to repeat anything in the presentation that wasn't clear.
Krista, while we're waiting for people to write questions in the Q&A box, I would like to give a little feeder question if that's possible. What should grantees do if there are funds remaining at the end of the grant?
That is a great question, Nikki, because occasionally that does happen. With any funds that are remaining at the end of your grant, you'll need to send them back to CLEAR at our address, which is also on the website. We have some specific instructions on where to direct them. If you have questions about that, we do often encourage recipients to consider a reallocation if there's a possibility of adding related items to your digitization project to help spend down those funds. We can help work through to brainstorm some ideas before you send the check back. But yeah, those would be returned to CLEAR at the end.
Yeah, that's another good reason for setting a calendar reminder for yourself. And we suggest about 3 months before your project end date. At that point, you can check your balance, see where you are, and if you're going to have surplus funds, we have plenty of time at that point to come up with a strategy to either extend the grant so you can spend the rest out, or to get busy or spend faster. We do realize that the cost of digitization or the estimates that were submitted with your proposal often change when, especially for those of you who are working with vendors, and we have in many cases seen recipients who are able to digitize significantly more than they had originally anticipated because of costs that are coming down. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right, I didn't see any questions come in, so either we did a very thorough job or put all of you to sleep. I hope not, because this is important information. But we do realize it is it's a lot to digest at the very beginning of the process, and a lot of this is stuff that feels like that you shouldn't be worrying about yet, and we are really hopeful that enough of it sunk in, or at least the URL for our related resources page sunk in, so you know where to go when the questions do arise later. Thanks for Jen for your thank you to us, and thanks to all the rest of you for attending today. We'll have the recording of this session available within the next 24 hours and posted on the recipient resources page. So fantastic. I see Jessica says that the project manifest can be adapted into your workflow moving forward. We're very excited about that. This is the project manifest is something that with the Recordings at Risk program, where we implemented it first, was a little tricky for some people, and we're still trying to get really good at helping people make this easy for themselves. So if you learned a way to make it super easy to adapt into your workflow, let us hear from you, because we would like to make it as easy as possible as we can. So, all right. Well, I don't see any reason to prolong the session. Except there's one question that's just come in from Gabriella. Thank you. If you have partner institutions that spent all of their funding, but you didn't spend your allocation, can the one partner send funds to the other partner? That's a great question. So Joy, do you have thoughts on that?
From our perspective, we have sent our funds to the primary applicant, which is where we're thinking about budgeting. And so it sort of depends on how you designated the funds on your budget detail, whether or not you would need to request a modification to accomplish that. So if you're just moving staffing funds from your organization to staffing funds at a partner organization, that typically doesn't require a formal reallocation request, though we are more than happy to answer that question if you get to that point and want to just double check. But if you're moving things between different budget lines, so if your funds were designated for like digitization costs, and then you're sending them to like equipment costs or conference costs, that would be something that we would definitely have to consider and think about. But we don't really have restrictions on how you decide to allocate your funding within a collaborative project.
Right. No, the money goes to the lead institution and then is allocated to the partners from that lead institution. So it totally depends on how you structure the budget. Sometimes you structure your budget in ways that make it easy for you to move funds between partners, and other times budgets are structured in ways that make it harder. So yeah, this might be something we'd have to consider on a case-by-case basis. So, and I know Nikki says in the chat here, no matter what the nature of the modification, grant modification requests are required for modifications that come to more than 5% of the total project budget. So anything over $10,000, we want to hear about. If it's below $10,000 and below 5% of your project budget, that may be something that you can just report to us. Right. So thanks for a brand new question. I don't think we have gotten that one yet. All right. So I see, yeah, I don't think that there's anything else. So why don't we wrap up today? We are here for you, the whole team at hiddencollections@clear.org anytime questions arise. and we want to stay in touch with you. I will just return to what Joy said at the beginning. If there are team members other than the principal investigator who are doing, substantial work on the project, it's great for us to have their contact names and email addresses so we can be sure that the notifications for reporting go out to the people who need to get those notifications. We, as far as we're concerned, we communicate with the principal investigators only unless we're told otherwise. So, so that's something to think about now.
It's also helpful for us if we do make any changes, or like we recently, our offices moved, so we needed to make sure everybody knew our new address. It's useful to have contact information for all of the people that are involved in the project, just so everybody's informed.
Exactly. Great. Well, we'll then close here, and thank you once again for your attention today, and good luck on your projects, and we look forward to hearing from you.